Hello. Welcome to the Sunday School Ministry of White Plains Baptist Church, located in Lawrence, South Carolina, where Dr. Johnny L. Johnson Jr. is the senior pastor. I am Tracy Gambriel Holland, an associate minister and also the Sunday School superintendent. Again, I say welcome. This is our summer quarter for 2021, Confident Hope. Unit 2 for July is Faith and Salvation. This unit has 4 lessons, and they explore in Paul's letter to the Romans his understanding of the hope of salvation through faith. Today's lesson is Paul's letter to the Christians in Rome, and it teaches that God's righteousness is revealed in those who live by faith. The gospel is the power of God that can save all those who believe. Today's lesson is July 11th, 2021, the power of the gospel. The word gospel means good news. The 4 gospels, which is known for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and also the account of the book of Acts, give an account of Jesus' life, his ministry, his crucifixion, his death, and most importantly, his resurrection. The gospel is the message concerning Christ, the kingdom of God, and salvation. Paul, formerly Saul, the persecutor of the Christians, wrote the letter to the Romans in advance to his trip there. Paul knew some of the Christians there based on the list of personal greetings he wrote in chapter 16 of the book of Romans. And Paul wanted them to grow in the right direction, and he knew they needed a strong doctrinal base and practical spiritual counsel. Paul wrote the book of Romans about AD 58 during his 3rd missionary journey. Our Bible background is Romans chapter 1 in its entirety, and our printed text is Romans chapter 1, verse 8 through 17. Our lesson aim is discern the power of God as illustrated in Paul's faith. Affirm the power of God's salvation in family and friends, and pray for the salvation of the world, believing it is possible. Our key verse, Romans chapter 1, verse 16. This is the King James Version, and it reads, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jews first, and also the Greek." Our outline, Paul's prayer and request, that's verse 8 through 13. And Paul's theme, verse 14 through 17. Paul's prayer and request. As we've already established that Paul is the writer of the book of Romans, and a letter written to the Christians in Rome. Now, he never visited the church in Rome, nor was he the founder of the church in Rome, but he was aware of their great faith. The Christians in Rome were in the heart of an immoral, unjust, and pagan society. Now, we're familiar with the phrase, all roads lead to Rome, as it goes, but it's because of Rome's location, because they had become a transportation hub for the entire empire. Now, Paul prayed sincerely, and he valued the advancement of the gospel of God's Son as his primary objective, and his relationship with the Christians in Rome was part of a vision for bringing the message of salvation to all people of the world. Paul's great desire to go to Rome was tempered by his intent to submit to God's will. Now, the route from Corinth to Rome would take only a few weeks, but Paul decided to return to Jerusalem before visiting Rome, and we find that in the book of Acts chapter 19, verse 21. So this delayed his trip to Rome for about a year or more. Also, Paul had been hindered by other circumstances, and even spiritual directions had changed his plans. That's in Acts chapter 16, verse 6. But Paul explained later in chapter 15 of the book of Romans that part of what prevented him was his great burden to preach the gospel among the Gentiles, and those would consider unbelievers. Now, if you were not a Jew or Jewish, then you were a Gentile, regardless of your ethnic background or anything of that nature. So the Greeks were also known as Gentiles. In Paul's day, the Greeks had a strong sense of cultural superiority based on their philosophical or deep thinking traditions and refined language. You see, even in the Greek culture, there were other persons that were uneducated or they didn't speak Greek. So then they were considered barbarians. But Paul's preaching was always inclusive, and knowledge and education levels were not a criteria for his target audience. So Paul was grateful and he was thankful to God for his fellow Christian believers. Our greatest plans, no matter how noble they may be, depend on God's blessing and assistance if they are to be successful. And Paul definitely knows that as we study about his him in Rome. Now, what aspects of life hinder us from following God's will for our lives and personal ministries? Paul's theme, verse 14 through 17. Now, Paul wrote specifically that he was not ashamed of the cross, but rather he glorified in it. You see, being crucified on a cross was a shameful thing. But here, Paul was showing that no, it is not. He is not ashamed, and it is not a shameful thing, but that he glorified in it. Not only does the gospel possess the power to save everyone who believes, it also has the power to break down the walls separating Jews and Gentiles. You have to understand that the Jewish people felt that God was for them and them alone. But Paul was like, no, God so loved the world, as John wrote in his gospel, John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So the gospel tells people how to become right with God. Getting right with God is something we can never earn or achieve through our own efforts. Our only hope is to accept by faith the gift of God's righteousness as provided by him through the death of his Son Jesus. Paul quoted a key Old Testament verse for understanding the nature of faith, and that's found in Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 4. The righteous will live by faith. So our job is to place our faith in God and in him to do the right thing in his perfect timing. So Christ's death on the cross was the right thing and the right time. It is what allows people to become justified, and it allows people to be treated as faultless before God's throne. So the price for our sin has been paid. So trusting in God is not new. When we read the Old Testament about Noah and Moses and Abraham, we know that they had faith and trusted God. But now we are to include our faith in Jesus Christ. That's what the New Testament is all about. That Jesus' death has the effect of saving us from our sin and the penalty of our sin, the wages. So it is faith then, it is faith now, in his faith going forward. So we must come to the cross in faith. We must not be ashamed. And we must come believing that the cross represents the great love of God. So we need to ask God to help us to live unashamed lives because of our love and trust for his Son, Jesus Christ. And to help us to give all that we have and who we are to serve him and to bring the gospel message to those who have not heard it, and to strengthen those who have. So the gospel is the power of God unto salvation, and it is the righteousness of God revealed. God is both just and the one who justifies, and one who justifies those who trust in him. What practical steps do you take to live by faith? So our summer quarter 2021, Confident Hope. July Unit 2, Faith and Salvation. Today was the power of the gospel. Our unifying principle is the gift to strengthen you. Here's a thought to remember. The gospel is powerful for all who believe. So be blessed. And thank you.